Imagine being the most famous woman in Britain. Your face is on every magazine. Your voice is on every radio. Millions of people think they know you, and every single one of them is wrong. Today, we're uncovering 10 legendary British women, actresses, singers, icons, who spent decades hiding something so deeply personal that even their closest friends didn't know the truth. One of them took her secret to the grave. Another only told the world after 60 years of silence. And number seven? Number seven will genuinely leave you speechless. Stay until the end, because the last name on this list is the one nobody ever expected. Hanhen Gramler, Dusty Springfield. Picture this, 1964. A young woman with a beehive hairdo and heavy black eyeliner steps onto a British television stage and opens her mouth. The entire country stops. Dusty Springfield didn't just sing. She felt everything and made you feel it too. You don't have to say you love me, son of a preacher man. Songs that sounded like they came from a place of real private pain. They did. What the public didn't know, what Dusty worked extraordinarily hard to keep hidden, was that the love she sang about was not always the love the world assumed. In her own words, in a 1970 interview with the Evening Standard, she became one of the first major British pop stars to openly acknowledge her attraction to both men and women. She said, and this is a direct quote, "I know I'm perfectly capable of being swayed by a girl as by a boy." That single sentence in 1970 Britain was an earthquake. The backlash was immediate. Radio stations grew cold. Certain television bookings quietly disappeared. The industry that had built her up began to quietly look away. Dusty Springfield responded the only way she knew how. She poured everything, every heartbreak, every fear, every moment of loneliness, back into her music. And she left Britain entirely, relocating to America, where she recorded Dusty in Memphis, now considered one of the greatest albums in pop history. She carried the weight of that era's judgment for decades. She was finally awarded an OBE in 1999. She died just weeks before she could collect it. The voice that moved millions was powered by a truth she was only just beginning to be allowed to tell. But if you think Dusty's story is extraordinary, wait until you hear number 2. Hongruel April Ashley. In 1961, the Sunday People newspaper ran a front-page story that destroyed a career overnight. The headlines exposed April Ashley, one of Britain's most sought-after fashion models, who had appeared in Vogue, worked with the world's greatest photographers, and moved in the most glamorous circles London had to offer as a transgender woman. April had been living her authentic life since a groundbreaking surgery in Casablanca in 1960, one of the earliest such procedures ever performed. She had rebuilt herself entirely, found success, found respect, found joy, and a single newspaper story took it all away. Modeling contracts vanished. Television appearances were cancelled. A subsequent court case in 1970 legally stripped her marriage of validity, in a judgment so cruel it was used in British law for over 30 years. April Ashley lost everything that year, and she rebuilt again. She wrote her autobiography. She gave speeches. She fought, quietly, persistently, with devastating elegance, for the right of every person to simply be. In 2012, the British government awarded her an MBE. In 2021, a full OBE. April Ashley's story is not a story of a secret. It's a story of a woman the world tried to erase, who refused to disappear. Let's move to number 3. Han Wrangel's Sandy Toksvig. In the 1980s, Sandy Toksvig was everywhere. Radio 4, panel shows. Beloved by the public as one of the wittiest, warmest broadcasters in Britain. Behind the scenes, she was living with a reality she knew could end all of it. In 1994, Sandy came out publicly, becoming one of the most prominent British media figures to do so at that time. The consequences were swift. She later described losing significant professional opportunities almost immediately. Certain doors, she said, simply closed. What the industry underestimated was Sandy Toksvig's sheer refusal to be diminished. She kept working, she kept writing, she co-founded the Women's Equality Party. She eventually became the host of QI, one of the BBC's most beloved programs. In a 2017 interview, she reflected that coming out, despite the professional cost, was the moment she finally felt she could do her best work. The woman they tried to sideline became one of British broadcasting's most enduring treasures. But what about those who never got the chance to speak for themselves? Number 4's story is one of the most heartbreaking on this entire list. Hangul, What's Coming Next? Numbers 5, 6, and 7. These are the stories that the history books quietly buried, the names everyone knows. The truths nobody told. Don't go anywhere. Hangul, Billy Whitelaw. Billy Whitelaw was Samuel Beckett's muse, his mouth in Not I, his presence in Footfalls. Beckett himself said she was the only actress who truly understood him. What the theatrical world discussed only in whispers was the profound, complex emotional nature of the bond between Billie and the women she was closest to throughout her life. Her autobiography, Billie Whitelaw, Who He, published in 1995, is honest about the extraordinary emotional depth of her connections, while maintaining the careful privacy she always insisted upon. Billie Whitelaw performed for 60 years. She took her full private story with her when she passed in 2014. What she left behind were performances of such raw, terrifying emotional truth that theatre scholars are still trying to understand how she did it. The answer, perhaps, is that she knew exactly what it meant to feel something she could not say out loud. Grambler, Quentin Crisp. Quentin Crisp walked through 1930s London in makeup, dyed hair, and painted fingernails. In 1930s London, when it was illegal, he was beaten on the streets regularly. He was refused employment. He was, by his own vivid description in The Naked Civil Servant, his memoir published in 1968, and later a landmark television film, considered by much of society to be beneath contempt. He walked those streets anyway, every single day. Quentin Crisp is perhaps the most defiant figure in this entire list. Not someone who hid, but someone who refused to hide at a moment in history when hiding was the only safe option. He once said, "It is not the simple statement of facts that ushers in freedom, it is the constant repetition of them." He repeated his truth every day of his visible, extraordinary life, and in doing so, he made it fractionally safer for everyone who came after him. Honfongel Claire Balding. Claire Balding is today one of Britain's most beloved sports broadcasters, the public face of BBC Olympic coverage, a national institution. What many viewers don't remember is that when Claire came out in the early 2000s, a Radio Times columnist responded with language so offensive that a formal complaint was upheld by the Press Complaints Commission. Claire's response was measured, precise, and utterly devastating. She wrote an open letter that is still studied as a masterclass in dignified, effective public pushback. She did not retreat. She did not apologize. She simply continued being brilliant at her job, until the industry had no choice but to recognize her as exactly what she was, the most capable broadcaster in the room. Hovenroble Sarah Waters. This is the name we promised would surprise you. Sarah Waters is not a television star. She's not a pop icon. She is a novelist. And she belongs on this list because of what her books did and what it cost her to write them. When Tipping the Velvet was published in 1998, a Victorian lesbian love story of extraordinary explicitness and beauty, Waters was told by multiple industry insiders that she was committing career suicide, that no mainstream publisher would support it, that no mainstream audience would read it. Tipping the Velvet became a bestseller. It was adapted by the BBC. It changed British literary culture. Sarah Waters has been nominated for the Booker Prize 3 times. The story the industry said nobody wanted to hear has now been read by millions. Sometimes the hidden truth isn't a person's secret. Sometimes it's a story that an entire industry was afraid to tell. Honviller Tom Robinson. 1977, Tom Robinson stood on a stage and sang Glad to Be Gay, live on the BBC, at the height of an era when that phrase was considered genuinely dangerous. The BBC received more complaints about that performance than almost any other that year. Tom Robinson received death threats. He kept singing. His work with the Tom Robinson Band made him one of the first major British pop figures to make LGBTQ rights an explicit central part of his artistic mission. Not a subtext, not a whisper, but a chorus everyone could hear. He later spoke honestly about the complexity of his own identity, something that took further courage and further honesty. He is, in every sense, someone who refused to let the industry, the press, or the public write a simpler version of his story than the true one. Havengriel Angela Eagle. In 1997, Angela Eagle became the first openly gay woman to be elected as an MP in the United Kingdom. She did not make a grand announcement. She did not stage a press moment. She simply showed up, was elected, and did her job. In an institution as traditional and frequently hostile as Westminster, that quiet, grounded refusal to perform either shame or spectacle was, and remains, its own form of profound courage. Angela Eagle's presence in Parliament changed what was considered possible for everyone who came after her. Han Hungriner, Michael Cashman, and finally, the name that shocked Britain more than perhaps any other on this list. In 1987, EastEnders broadcast the first gay kiss in British soap opera history. The 2 men involved were Colin Russell, played by Michael Cashman, and his partner Barry. The BBC switchboard was overwhelmed. Questions were asked in Parliament. The Daily Mail ran headline after outraged headline. Michael Cashman went home after filming that scene and received hate mail for months. What happened next? He became a founding member of Stonewall UK. one of Britain's most important LGBTQ+ rights organisations. He was elected to the European Parliament. He was made a life peer, Baron Cashman of Limehouse, in 2013. The kiss that shocked Britain helped change Britain. Handled 10 people, 10 hidden truths, 10 different kinds of courage. Some hid out of fear, some were forced into silence by law. Some stood in the open and endured everything the world threw at them. All of them made Britain, quietly, painfully, undeniably, more honest. If this video moved you, hit like and share it with someone who needs to hear these stories. Drop a comment below. Which person on this list surprised you the most? I read every single one. And subscribe, because next time, we're uncovering the British icons whose careers history completely rewrote. That one will shock you just as much. See you there.